Hey everybody, it's Jesse and I am back again for the last installment of Social School for the month of March. And what we are going to do today is we are going to talk about the social skill of following directions. It's not everybody's favorite thing to do, but it is super important. So last week we talked about how important it is to be able to ask for help, and oftentimes when we do ask for that help, what we get in return is we get some directions, some idea of what it is that we need to do if we want to fix our problem. So we have to be able to not only be willing to ask for help, but be able to follow those directions. And there are some reasons why this can be a difficult skill, but in the workplace, it is probably one of the most important skills that you can have. And so again, we're going to talk about, what are some of the consequences of not following directions correctly? What are some of the reasons why, people don't always do it? We'll take this skill, we'll break it down into the steps and go through those. And then hopefully when it's all wrapped up, you will feel pretty comfortable in following directions. So where I typically start is just talking about, what can happen to us if we don't follow good directions. And there's all kinds of examples of things that can happen. You might fail at a task. I've had students before who have broken things at work because, they weren't paying attention when they were told what to do, and those sorts of things. For people who repetitively just do not do a good job of doing what they're told to do, oftentimes they end up losing their job. So the workplace consequences of not being able to follow directions can be pretty serious. You think about this in terms of in life, and if someone is telling you where to go or what to do, and you're not really paying attention or you can't follow those directions, then you might end up lost. And so we don't want to get lost. We don't want to get in trouble. We don't want to have to deal with those kinds of consequences. So it's probably a good idea, that we do this. And so we think about then some of the reasons why, people have a hard time following directions. And those come in a few different forms. For some of us, if you're anything like me, you're a little bit of a rebel and you like to do things on your own, or you like to do them your own way. And you might give it a shot before, you really pay attention to what those directions might be. For some people also, I fall into this category, you might have a hard time paying attention. And so there are some extra steps that we have to take so that we make sure that we are doing a good job of following through with what we're told to do and doing it the right way. And so there's all kinds of reasons why, people don't necessarily do a good job with this skill. But what I'll tell you is, just like in asking for help, the consequences can be so serious that it is a good idea that we work on this skill, that we get better. For some of us, myself included, this is going to be a lifelong journey, right? So following directions, following instructions is something that, I'm still getting better at 48 years of age. And so what I'm going to do for you now is we're going to get into it. We'll look, I'll give a brief overview of these steps. We'll get into it and then see what we come up with. And so here we have the basic directions for following directions. Here are the steps. And again, this is a simple skill. There's not a lot to it, but you want to think about these things and you want to take your time with them. So in step number 1, we listen carefully while we are being told what to do. Take notes if necessary, right? There's no shame in writing down directions. If you have to, maybe stop, get a pen and paper, or do whatever you have to do, but be a good listener. Step number 2, ask questions about anything that you do not understand. So checking for clarification is something that people who are good at following directions definitely do. Step number 3, decide if you want to follow the instructions and let the person know your decision. And at this point we think about the positive and negative consequences of following the instructions. Is this something that I'm willing and able to do? Step number 4, we repeat the instructions to ourselves. We do this in our own words, making sure that we understand. And then maybe if you have to, you repeat those instructions back to the person to check for understanding again. You say, okay, so what I heard you say is that you want me to take the trash out and make sure that I lock the dumpster up when I'm done, or whatever it is. And in the last step, we just do whatever it is that we've been asked to do. You know, we follow through with following these directions. And so, again, very, very simple, very basic thing, but for a lot of us, we struggle with this. And so it's a good idea to kind of in your head, just kind of think through what it is you're going to do and how you're going to do it. In the first step of following directions, we have to be good listeners. And if you remember back to a couple videos ago, I gave you pretty specific instructions on, you know, how to do this. We're going to stop whatever it is that we're doing. We're going to face the person. We're going to have good listening posture, right? We think about what that person is saying. We make sure that we're not busy doing something else. We wait our turn to talk. We don't want to interrupt. You have to do a good job of being a listener. And so again, this is a skill that a lot of us need to work on. And so you can kind of see as we do these things, as we go through, you know, these steps, they kind of build on each other. And so, you know, to be a good listener, not only, you know, for the feelings of others, but also to follow directions means that we have to pay attention. And this can be hard for some of us. But it's one of those things that you have to do, right? So you just have to do it. And by putting everything else away, stopping what you're doing, and really focusing on, you know, whoever's talking, whoever's giving the instructions, you'll give yourself the best possible chance of being able to follow through with these directions. The other thing I want to talk about real quick, though, is that sometimes directions that we get are written. And I personally, you know, don't always read instructions if I'm, you know, putting something together, or if I, you know, am trying to hook something up. I don't always want to read those instructions. You know, I try to do it on my own, but it is a good idea in general, if you're given something to read or some kind of written instructions, take the time to actually read through and do it. And sometimes it does take a little extra time, and it's not always real convenient, or, you know, something that we want to do. But it's a good idea to read those instructions and make sure that you understand, because if, you know, someone is taking the time to tell you what to do, there's probably a good reason why they're telling you what they're telling you. And so, you know, we want to be a good listener. We want to make sure that we're reading those instructions, and we want to start off, you know, this skill of following directions, and we want to do it the right way. So you've gotten your instructions, and you've been a good listener, and you tried your very best to understand what the person is telling you to do, you know, how it is that you're supposed to do whatever it is that you're supposed to do next. And let's be honest, there are some people, these may be managers or coworkers, or someone who, you know, maybe isn't real good at giving those instructions. And so there may be some questions that you have. There might be some things that you don't understand. And especially when you're starting a new task, or, you know, for a lot of us when we start new jobs, we may not have questions. You know, do they teach you how to operate the machinery that you need to use? Do they tell you exactly where everything is? You know, you might have some questions. And so, you know, this honestly by itself could be its whole own separate social skill. But we want to be willing and able to ask questions. And it's okay, because again, it is so much better to ask questions and check for clarification than it is to make a mistake, right? So if we want to do a good job at this skill of following directions, then we need to be able to ask questions when we have them. And it's a good thing to ask questions, just like in asking for help. This is a way to show the person who's giving the directions that you want to make sure and do it right. And so it is so much better to take the time and go slow and make sure that you ask questions about anything that you don't understand. And it is okay, especially when you haven't been given directions before, that you want and are able to know, or you want to know how to do. All right, step number 3. Decide if you want to follow the instructions and let the person know your decision. And you know, you may think to yourself, well, duh, this is my job. Of course I'm going to do what I'm told to do. But there are some times where maybe you're asked to do something that you don't feel qualified for or don't feel capable of. And so, you may not always be able to do it, or you may not always be willing to do it. If a coworker is asking you to do their job for them, then maybe, you don't want to do it. But as you kind of go through this step, you have to think about, what are the positive and negative consequences of following the instructions? Is it going to help me in my job? Is it going to help the company that I work for? Is it really the right thing to do? And so, this seems like an obvious one, a no-brainer, but we want to give it some thought, and we want to, make sure that this is something that we're willing and able to do. The other part of this that I want to talk about is, letting the person know what you have decided to do. And obviously, if it's your boss, you should probably go ahead and do whatever it is that they've asked you to do. And once you've made that decision that you're going to follow through, then let that person know. That's just basic good communication. You look that person in the eye. Since you've been a good listener, you look that person in the eye and you say, okay, you want me to take the trash out? I'll get right on it. Or, maybe you are being asked to work the front line and you say, okay, well, I've never worked the front line before. Can you help me? I want to do it, but I may need a little extra help. And so by communicating back to, whoever it is that's given your instructions, your willingness and your ability to do the job that you've been asked to do, you kind of, you move this whole thing along. And that's what we're really looking for here. And again, good communication skills say that we should let that person know that, we're going to do what they say. And it may seem awkward or feel a little bit funny to say, sure, boss, I'll get right on that. But there's no problem with that. And that's actually a good thing to do. And it's just something that good communicators will do for the most part, almost every time that they're given instructions. Sometimes your boss or manager or coworker, may give you a whole bunch of instructions in a row, and tell you a whole bunch of different things to do at once. And in general, probably people shouldn't say more than 2 or 3 things to do at a time. But sometimes those instructions are going to be complicated and they take a lot of steps, or there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle. And so this is where step number 4 comes in. So we want to repeat the instructions kind of back to ourselves in our own head. We want to think about what we've been asked to do and kind of put it in our own words. And so maybe, what somebody tells you to do is go clean the lobby. And you might ask, well, what exactly do you want me to do? And they'll come back with, well, I want you to wipe down all the tables, and then you move the tables and sweep, and then when you're done sweeping, you need to mop the whole floor. And so you just kind of think through the steps in your own head and put this in your own words, in your own head, so that and as you do this, you can kind of think through what information might still be needed. What is it that you still need to do? Where's the mop bucket? Where are my supplies? What do I need to do? Where do I put the tables when I move them? Whatever it is. And then sometimes, and again, this might feel a little bit awkward, but you want to repeat those instructions back to whoever gave them to you to make sure that you get it right. And so, I might say back to my boss, okay, boss, you want me to clean the lobby, and I'm going to wipe down the tables, and I'm going to sweep, and then I'm going to mop, and then, maybe you ask, you're like, okay, so then what do I do when I'm all the way done? And so this is a good time to, again, just open that line of communication with whoever gave your directions, and also to make sure that you check for understanding that you get these things right. And I will tell you that there have been times where I have been given instructions, and what I need to do is I need to write it down, right? So when I'm given a list of things to do, if I want to stay, on track and on task, then I need to give myself a list. And so at that point, I'll just get out a Post-it note and I'll just kind of write off a little checklist of things that I need to do. And again, it might seem a little weird or feel a little bit awkward, but that way I'm going to do it right. I'm going to make sure, that I am following these directions and I'm following them to the letter. So if we want to be good at following directions, we have to take the time to, put these things in our own words, to make sure that we really understand. And if we have to repeat it back to whoever gave our instructions, then that's actually a good thing, and there's no problem with that either. All right. At this point, we have gone through all the steps that we needed to do for following directions, and it's time for us to follow through, right? To do what we're actually being paid to do. And so, as you get into this process and you start doing the things that you've been asked to do, it is perfectly acceptable at any point in time for you to go back and, ask for help, ask for extra instructions. And just remember, the important thing is that you do the job right. And yes, it's important that we do the job quickly, but even more than that, it's important that you do the job correctly. So if I have to stop and say, oh, do you remember when you told me to do this thing? I was doing it this way. Am I doing it right? That's something else, is that as we get started and get into this, it's okay to, stop and make sure that you're doing the right thing or doing it the right way. And so by checking in, you really do, you do yourself a favor, you do your boss a favor, you do your company a favor when you check in and you make sure that, you're getting that job done right. And if you've been on your job for a long time, then, as this goes on, you'll have to do this less and less, and you'll have to be told less and less what to do or how to do it. And so, it gets easier, especially as you become familiar with your coworkers, when you become familiar with your bosses and the people that you work for and the job that you're doing. You're going to have to do this less and less. But at this point, hopefully you feel comfortable in whatever it is that you're doing. And if you don't, then, you can stop and start this process all over again. So I want to thank everybody again for showing up. I will tell you that this is the last of the videos that I'm going to do for the month of March. I'll see you guys back again here in a couple weeks. And just want to sign off for now and hope everybody enjoys their spring break if that's what's coming up, or just this lovely weather. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.